and scroll down to creating a container instance. Microsoft does a good job of providing a sample. And that's what I'm going to use. And how it's saying how to create on-demand SQL FTP server with a new Azure file persistent storage. We have an existing one, so we're going to leverage the existing one, and we're just going to do a straight deployment into our environment. And this is what we call a custom deployment. Uh, you can create one yourself. Microsoft has just given us custom deployment, and this doesn't have some capabilities, and I'll show you what we have when it launches. Hopefully, it does launch sometime. This is bug. So it says custom deployment here. Some defaults are put in for us. It wants you to select the resource group. The region is already set up. It's going to ask you for storage account resource group, which is the same name, 1218. And we're going to keep the existing storage name. We're going to keep the file name is the same. This is where that file share comes in that we created earlier. Because we're going to start using secure FTP. We're going to create a password for it. Let me make sure. Actually, that's the right one. And then we're going to review and create. Now, this doesn't have tags because this is a custom deployment. This is just using the marketplace, but it's putting down a container instance. Now, a container instance is just one single machine that cannot be, it can't have multiple versions of it. So this doesn't horizontally scale. Because we're just using it for moving files, we don't need a heavy a beefy machine. We just need something that just allows us to connect to it from the outside world. This actually is actually going to a Docker repository in Azure, and it's pulling down an image. I mean, sorry, a Docker repository and pulling an image and installing it into this environment from Docker, and also putting the operating system on top. So it's doing a couple of things at once, and it's pretty quick. It takes about a minute to deploy, and then once that's deployed, we can go into the container instance. And then you can see that it's running on, I chose to run it on a Linux operating system because it's cheaper in a scenario like this. And I recommend using, if you're doing simple things like as file transfers, choose the cheapest machine you can get or the cheapest operating system you can buy so you can actually do that. Now, I recommend don't using the public IP address because this machine, we don't own it, Microsoft does. And every so often they restart it and then this IP address changes. So I recommend using the fully qualified domain name if you decide to go this route. So for file transfer, for secure file transfer, there's a lot of software out there. I'm using FileZilla because that's pretty popular app that most people use for secure file transfer. You can use SSH. You can write bash scripts. There's so many ways to do it, but the reason why I'm using FileZilla because that's a nice UI, and I want to take advantage of that. All right, so let's see. All right, so we're going to our training place. Let's go over here. Give me a second. Let me see if I can pull it up. I had it pull up already. All right, let's connect first. So we take the host, which is what that is. I mean, you connect with F, FTP is the password. I mean, password we put it in. And then the port is always going to be port 22 because we're using secure transfer. And then if everything works correctly, we should get a handshake. And then it will drop a footprint, which is basically just saying that you have to trust this machine. So it will any connections from the machine to be trusted. And we should be good to go. And then I need to find uh testing. I was here a minute ago. I don't know what I did with it. Give me a second here. I think it's that one. Nope. That one here. I'm just trying to get the testing database set up for this guy. Right, I think this is it. Oh, we're going to be moving it. So if you notice that these files, the sample file we use were like 2 meg. So we're going to be moving much larger loads here. We're moving like 1 million records. So this is a really small, very realistic production environment where we're moving a large amount of files. So we're moving something like 3 million records into our folder, upload folder here. So this is where the upload folder comes into play. And if I right click here and upload this, this is going to take a little while to move these files out. Right. I have a very slow connection today for some reason. Right. So that's getting uploaded. Now if you scroll, while that's getting uploaded, it doesn't take a little while to do its thing. One of the things about using a container instance is that you can see your utilization here. You can see how much CPU you're using. You can see how much memory you're using. So you're looking at live. So you can actually decide whether you need to spin up multiple versions of this. It does have metrics information, so you can capture things, and it also has logs. So everything has, this is basically something that if you add it in network operating center and using this frequently, you can attach to an existing workspace, which we provisioned earlier. So I'm going to attach to this existing workspace. I can configure this to attach to my existing workspace. So I'm also capturing activity instead of my container instance. I recommend doing that. So that way, if this actually runs out of memory or is running low on memory, you can wrap some alerts around this if you wanted to do that. So that's what's a good capability that is there as well. Okay, that's okay. That didn't work. I don't know why that didn't work, but we can come back to that. Maybe because it's been pushing files right now. Now, while the files are going out there, we can actually open up Azure Function and see what's going on inside of our application, right? Now, this is what we're going to talk about log analytics workspace and application insights. This is the last piece. I know we're running past time, but I'll quickly run through the last two pieces. So application insight, what does that do? So application insight is basically looks at our APIs and the behavior APIs and provides some insights into it. So some performance, connectivity, anything around that, failures, as you can see right here. And then the one thing I tend to do is look at the performance tab here. And this will give us the behavior of our system, how many calls have been made. We know this event is an event trigger here, has been hit a number of times. You can actually click on this and you can actually drill down into the sample files. I always recommend doing this because if you have multiple APIs out here, you can actually investigate each individual call. So these are the individual call level. So if you're in a system where you have lots of transactions on a daily basis, and there's maybe a 3 o'clock window, 3 to 4, maybe 3 to 4, you had a lot of discrepancies in your database or API was down or there's some weirdness going on in your API. You can actually come here and say, okay, let me look at the last 3 to 4, let me look at the time between 3 and 4, how many calls were made, and you can actually drill down and find out why you had issues. So this actually tell you how long things took. 60 milliseconds, connectivity is to 1.5 milliseconds for the trigger. The NoSQL trigger actually did very well. It did that in 200 milliseconds. So I can tell that my SQL database is taking longer to connect to a backend system. So instantaneously, I can get my feedback on the performance without having to do much work. The other thing that you can look at is live metrics, which is basically why I tend to keep to the network operating center as well. This gives you a visualization into your whole entire app and what servers are running. So this is where I talked about a vertical, horizontal scaling. Now that data is coming through, real data is coming through, the servers are going to start growing. So we have two physical servers that are trying to handle all the load that we're sending to it right now. Because we're sending millions of records. So it's going to, and now we have three physical servers. So this automatically scaling to handle load. So this is not something you have to worry about. Microsoft does a great job of taking care of that for you. If you use a consumption plan, you can test, you can move as much data as you want, and Microsoft will take care of that for you. Now, transaction search, very, very important. If you're new to Azure, you've hooked up App Insights, you just want to get rolling, and someone says there's an error in the system, this is as basic as it gets. You just type in error and you hit send. It's going to go out and try to figure out what errors you have in your system without you doing anything and just find it. There's an exception here. There's this here. There's a query issue here. It's going to find anything that has any errors in your system, which will automatically find it out for you without you having to do much work. So you can just quickly find out what's causing errors in my system. I purposely put errors in this system so you can see how this works. It gives you messages of what's going on here. You can figure out what's going on here. You can find this, you can find that. So they're going to have some errors. We're moving a lot of data. Like I mentioned to you when I created the service bus, I did choose a cheap option. So I did choose a premium version. So these are you have some gotchas when you choose something that's relatively cheap and you're moving a lot of data. Um, Another thing to talk about is Service Bus. How are we doing in Service Bus? So now we can go into real insights, see how our backend is performing, how our data is moving in real time. This tells you at the queue level or at the physical level how many files are sitting actively. If this number grows, that means your system is underperforming on the other side. But you would have messages that stop because the messages are getting pushed to queue faster than they're getting processed. That's where you're seeing this um messages. But if you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages coming through and then the backend system is not processing that, then that becomes a problem, right? And I can actually go through a quick way to demo that. I don't recommend doing this anyway, but I can show you how we can demo that. So I'm going to leave this window open and I'm going to go to this window, come out from here and go into the function and disable one of the function apps. And then you see the messages starting to pile up. So go to my function app here. Again, I would never recommend doing this unless you have a backend system that is unless you're in a banking environment where the backend system goes down every night, then you have to manually disable the system. So if I disable one of these guys here, which is a service bus that's listening and putting messages in our NoSQL database. So I disable that NoSQL trigger. So this is one that's putting that NoSQL database. I just disable that now. And if I go back to it takes about it takes about a couple seconds for that to run through. You will start seeing, well, if there's any messages coming in, you will see that. And in the meantime, while I was doing that, you can actually go in here and check to see how many messages are coming through. So we noticed when we started, we had a little blip here. This was when we we're doing a manual testing. But now we're doing some real loads. You can see that we are pulling requests in the thousands. So we just done 3.5K well requests. Each one of these requests has 200 records inside of it. And that's growing. If I refresh here one more time, we notice that the SQL database actually still it hasn't stopped officially. So it's taking a while because that physical server is out there. The servers have to power down and more servers have to power up before it starts doing that. So now the message is still getting cleared out because the servers are still having power down. So as servers power down and more servers power back up, then it is that holding the messages. Let's see. No new ones. Still going through. They're still going through nicely, which is good, but we want to be able to see that. While this is going, I can actually show you a cool trick. So in here, if you wanted to inspect the messages, again, I won't recommend this again. Microsoft offers a thing called a Service Bus Explorer. And it's really what it is. It allows you to explore the messages that are being passed through your system in real time. You can peek into the next message that would end up in the queue and you can actually inspect it. So if you're not sure, you want to just eyeball it and see what's going on. But you want to understand your size limitations. This is why I make decisions about how I can batch my size. So if I'm at 49K and I have a 1 meg size, I can increase it. But you just have to be careful on your brand that your brand can actually process it. So I stay in a safe number, which is around 200 to 500 records. So that way I don't have any issues on your brand in SQL. So you can actually pick into the message itself and look at it as well. So Microsoft offers that capability. Now let me see whether this is disabled. This is still processing the messages. That's interesting. I hasn't disabled it yet, so it's still going. I wanted to show that, but obviously I can't show you that right now. Now the last piece, I keep saying there's one more, is how do we inspect what is going on in our environment, what's really going on in here. So you can actually run a query like this. These are called custom queries, and they're in the documentation. And this is where the log analytics workspace comes in. That's the guy that's looking at everything that's going on within our system. So I go back to my resource group here. I go into my log analytics workspace. Actually, no, I'm going to here. Let me just navigate it through App Insights so that way we can see a better view of it. So it's going to App Insights. And scroll down to my logs on the left pane. You can scroll down to logs here. I'll find it. And this brings you into here, which is basically the subtables that are built for collecting data. So we're going to go into the advanced mode or the KQL mode. I'm going to paste our KQL query. That's what these are called, KQL queries. And if I run this now, it's going to be showing me charts of all the activity going on connected to all different systems and how they're behaving. So this is basically a chart saying we started at 8:36. We started ingesting a lot of load. These are all the systems that did all the work for us. We have a couple of search in the database. We did messaging. We can actually filter it down to what we want if you wanted to. So, for example, I have an example here. We can uncomment this, and I can run this. Oops, there's nothing on the receive side, which is interesting. Maybe I did something wrong. Let's see. In doubt, look at your documentation. So this is how I'll find out. Oops, let's go up. So service bus trigger for SQL. Let's grab that. Leave that window open. Let's go to our containers here. And I also want to grab one key that we can use to search. So in the config files, I have keys at every process level. So if you want to just use search for process and see what it's doing, I can go. So I'm actually going into this guy, and I want to make sure I want to search for how often my data is going into my database. So I'm going to search for received messages from server and it's put into our database. So I want to see how this is performing. So I can go back to Acousto query. I can find it, and I can then change this to what that represents. So this is how granular you can get with using log analytics. You can search at a process level to see how your application is behaving. And then you can see your ingestion rate. Now, when you see gaps, this side where I'm throttling. When I see a gap here between 8:36 and 8:38 here, that tells me that I'm hitting the throttle limits because I purchased a cheap service bus. So when the throttles let go, you can see that it starts to increase, then it shrinks again because it hit the throttle limits again. Microsoft does it that way. It actually manages how messages are sent. Then it pushes messages back out. Then it pushes more messages back out. And this is when it pushes the large send. So I can hit 1,500 messages and a batch of 200s in 1 minute, which is roughly about just over 200, almost 250, over 250,000 files a minute or records a minute coming into our system here. But if I have a better service bus, this would be more flatlined. So if you're in an enterprise environment, I recommend using a premium solution. These are kind of the things that you may not be able to pick up very easily. But it's something I've discovered during my time doing some work for companies or teams I've worked with. They actually, I always make sure we have some of these capabilities baked in so we can do granular testing of what's going on. Now, you can also do the same thing with the trigger. So if I want to know how many triggers, how many times my blob trigger ran. So this is the service bus trigger. This is the blob trigger. This is the guy that puts all the messages on the service bus. So I want to inspect that and find out how many times that ran. I can actually go back to my config file and type in that guy and then pass the key that represents what is doing at that level. So this is process level key. So each step in the process has its own key. This is the guy sending messages uh to the service bus. So I can go in and say, okay, how often are messages getting sent to the service bus versus how often are messages getting taken off the service bus. And if you wanted to do a side-by-side comparison, you can actually just draw two charts, one for one for another, and see how consistent that's happening. So messages on the service bus, again, there's a gap here. You can see that the messages are getting put on the service bus. So they're actually close. Messages going on and coming off. So the issue might not even be on the service bus. It might be on the function app. Spin up multiple, it doesn't have enough machines horizontally to handle the load, and the load is coming in pretty quickly. And then it's going to make adjustments as needed to accommodate the load. So that's Crystal Query's what Crystal Query's offers in terms of graphs, in terms of this thing. But that's the last piece. So hopefully you have a chance, go in here. I did put this in the chat already. Go in here, follow this, build it out. This is a very long training course. There's a lot of things we covered here, a lot of resources we pointed out. We solved the business problem, which is what the client wanted. We provided them all the capabilities they want, including an API, and they're happy. So that's really what the goal was for this exercise today. Uh, I don't know who else is on, but if you guys have any questions, opportunity to ask any questions, or we can close out the call.
Will you be having another training like this because I didn't charge my phone up, and when I got to the family room, which is kind of far away from
Hmm.
my apartment complex, I kind of missed the middle part, like 20% of it. Well, like 20 minutes of it.
Well,
Well,
that's
you
fine.
have
I mean,
another one, or do you have it on YouTube or
yeah, I do have. So, you joined late, which is good. So that's a good question, actually. So at the beginning, this URL is in the chat if you look at it now, and inside this URL, I do have previous sessions here, right? So you can, and this is on YouTube, by the way. So you can actually go to this on YouTube, a previous session, similar to the session I'm doing right now. So you can go in and actually walk it and stop it and pause it and go back. So that's why I record these
thank
sessions.
you.
So you are right. This README has everything you need to get going. It has the sessions. It walks you through the documentation that I just went through. I do make changes to documentation. I try to refine it to make sure it's more intuitive. So if you guys have any feedback, just let me know. So you should
N-
be good to go.
You said it's in the chat. I don't see it in the chat.
Oh, okay. Let me put it back in one more time.
Okay.
All right. So you have access to it.
Thank you.
Hmm.
I understand it a lot better now
Or
because it's
you've had a few sessions with this.
no. I just kind of got an understanding now of, I guess you pronounce it Azure. I really can't
It's Azure,
pronounce
yeah,
it.
Azure, yeah,
Azure.
Azure. Everybody has their own way of calling it, but Azure, yeah. But this is basically um what Azure offers. So my training courses are slightly different because I focus more around delivery of business value using Azure versus just playing around into Azure and just understand how it works. So if you decide to use pick resources for that has business value, you can actually have an insight into what resources do I pick to provide value to the business. So I have a
Oh,
lot of use cases. This is one of many use cases. I have different solutions on my GitHub repository. I have a lot of use cases in my repository, but if you go to the base URL of my repository, there should be a lot of public facing repos here that offer options that you can do. So I keep building it as I go along, but I have different repositories, but most of the ones around Azure, I'm spending a lot more time around Azure and Power BI and some other things, but there's a bunch of ones that you can freely get access to. Once you're comfortable in Azure, you can actually use that as well. Go in there and work on other projects as well. So that's the
thank
base
you.
URL. Then you can go into the repositories. Actually, no, let me give it this one. This is much easier
Yeah,
to
it's going to
provide.
take me a while, but
Yeah.
I didn't have a real good understanding of what
Hmm.
Azure was
Yeah.
really for. I knew that I was trying to link it. I know that it's for cloud, but I was like, I'm still not getting it. So I have an understanding before I start training more in it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I talked about at the beginning of the lecture. I talked about what you need to get started. So if you go to the recording, this recording takes a while. I have to edit it and cut out some pieces, but I'll make it available in the next couple of days, and you should be able to see this current one. But there's a previous one which is already pre-edited and ready to go. So if you want to take a look at that link and just start getting going from there, you should be good.
Okay.
Hmm.
Thank you.
All right.